What I'm talking about is the maze that people go through in life to get what you want to achieve. I started that because a long time ago I read this paper by Anthony Wallace where he talks about maze ways, and he said that in life you have to figure out how to get from point A to point B, how to get money from an ATM or be successful in life or whatever it is, or how to get food or a vehicle. And so I started thinking about, this is the happy life that you want. You end up having kids with good prenatal care. Cutie. Cutie likes other cutie. Then they grow up and they go to school and play football and accidentally get caught with some weed. But you get a good lawyer and you go to college and then you get a job in the food industrial complex, military industrial complex, pharmaceutical industrial complex, energy industrial complex, in which case you buy yourself a Prius so you don't feel so bad about it. Or the media industrial complex, or the financial something or other complex, or the nonprofit industrial complex, or the educational industrial complex. Basically what you do is you figure out, and if you're good at that and you're innovative, then you get to do a TED Talk. And your life is made. So the idea is that the maze ways work. You figure out some way to get into the superstructure, and it's meaningful, and you're happy, and it works out. But what I discovered is the maze ways aren't working for everyone. Truth be told, we've known this for a long time. There are many, many authors who've talked about it. One of them is Michael Harrington, whose book came out in 1961, I think, and apparently it's where the Great Society programs come from. Barbara Ehrenreich has a book, Nickel and Dime, on Not Getting By in America, where they talk about their kind of two Americas. There's a lot of us here who are successfully navigating the maze ways, and then there are a whole bunch of people who aren't. Bad neighborhoods, the graffiti, or houses that are abandoned. Have you ever noticed that when you go to different cities across America, when you go to Martin Luther King Boulevard, that it's the crappiest street in the city? Yeah. They're all over the place. The neighborhood here is what, on the other side of Memorial Drive or something like that, if you go all the way down Briarcliff, right? In New Orleans, it's the lower 9th Ward. Wherever any of you are from, there is that place. It's true. It's kind of sad, but it's true. It's like everybody here knows what's going on the other end of town, and sometimes we go out and we do service learning weekends and we try to help, or whatever. We do a little bit after-school tutoring, but 40 years after the war on poverty started, we're still, or I should say now, sorry, 50 years, it's still the same problem. It's still there. And everybody wants it to end. The happy-go-lucky people on the beach driving the Prius know it's wrong. But it's like people haven't figured out how to make the connection to actually get it done, which is why I'm really trying to talk to the people here who are under 25, because when the next book comes out 40 years later and the thing still hasn't been done, we're all like, what are we going to do, right? Well, why is that? Because there are so many factors, right? Why are kids falling through the cracks? Why are neighborhoods messed up? Why does Louisiana have the highest youth incarceration rate in the world? That's where I live. Racism, rap videos and baggy jeans. Kids just rebel against authority and they're doing stuff and that gets them in trouble. The teacher telling the kids to stop saying ain't in school. Like ain't is really the source of the problem, but then that causes friction in the classroom and it causes the grades to go down, and bad parenting is what we often blame it on. And if you want to work your way through the list, you can work your way through the list. Everybody knows all these things. We talk about it all the time. The last one, of course, it's Obama's fault now. So the key is that, or what I've figured out, or makes sense to me, is that the industrial education system as we know it is designed to work most of the time for most of the people. But there's like an acceptable error in there. It's like we're allowed to have some unemployment, we're allowed to have some mess up, some computer mistakes, or whatever it is, or robotics mistakes. And then we blame it on all kinds of different things, and then there's still a whole bunch of kids who keep falling through the cracks. So when I first went down to New Orleans, people were telling me, I used to say, it's not that the kids are falling through the cracks in New Orleans, it's that there's no sidewalk at all. In our neighborhood, we have like 60, 70% dropout rate. There's no jobs for them. if you're a sociology person, this guy's really cool. He does systems thinking. His name is Bronfenbrenner. And he says you need to think of a kid like a fish tank, or like a fish in a fish tank, and you're creating the society and this ecosystem that they live in, right? And so if you put real plants in there, or if you put plastic plants, if you put a castle in there, one of those little treasure chest boxes that opens and closes, you control the temperature, you control the aeration. And if we think about it like that, then maybe we'll get a little bit further if we realize that we really need to control for all these different things, because what we want is for kids to be able to figure out how to navigate the system. That's what we all really want. And so UNESCO defines literacy, which is figuring out how to make the maze way, as the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute using printed and written materials associated with varying contexts. Literacy involves a continuum of learning in enabling individuals to achieve their goals, to develop their knowledge and potential, and to participate in their community and wider society. That's really the key. As I was saying before, there are a whole bunch of people who don't have those literacy skills, right? That broader literacy. Some of them didn't get it in school. Some of them are just opting out and don't really want to deal with it. Some of them have figured out, particularly in New Orleans, I've noticed, and I don't know how epidemic this is in other places, that you can get a Social Security disability check for like $610 a month, and Section 8, and food stamps. And then to make a little bit more money on the side, you sell weed or scrap copper out of abandoned houses in New Orleans, or sell hot DVDs, and that's the plan for the rest of your life. If you could get that for the rest of your life, would you give it up to go to school, to go to college at 17 years old? You're like, I could put it all in line. I could try to go get a job that I might get fired from, in which case I lose my disability check. That one really freaked me out when I figured that one out. I was like, how the hell can you like live a life where you get $610 a month for the rest of your life, and that's the plan? Do nothing, go nowhere, have no hope. It was late when I was doing this PowerPoint. I'm not really making this up. It's all over the place. The question is, what do we do about it? As a quick aside, we have a bayou, which is a swamp in New Orleans. This picture was taken in 1900. This is like a little exercise in systems thinking, and I believe allegorical to what I'm talking about with the kids. That's 1900. That's last year. What killed the Cypress Triangle is what we call it, the bayou, right? What killed it? A lot of people say that the Mississippi River Gulf outlet, Mr. Go, allowed salt water to get up into the system and killed all the cypress trees that were in there. And now they've closed it, and they've tried to replant again and again, and nothing will grow. And I was like, well, there's always the one obvious answer. Oh, it's the bad parents. Oh, it's we don't have strict enough testing. Oh, it's whatever is why the kid is failing and the Cypress Triangle died. And I started looking around and going, well, there is this landfill up here that's leaking Bic pens, baby diapers, and car batteries down into the water. There's a scrapyard where they load all the cars, the crushed cars that are dripping gasoline, transmission fluid, oil, antifreeze down into the water. Could be the water treatment facility right here that every once in a while kicks out 100,000 gallons of nasty poo water. Or it could be the Chalmette oil refinery, which they finally just started like measuring the toxic or the levels in the smoke and the emissions and stuff. And they set up a fake house about a mile away from it that's filled with all these sensors and everything. And apparently it's going over every single day. And it's been going over every single day, I guess, for as long as it's been there. Louisiana has really, really weak environmental laws, needless to say. Or it could be all the poisons that are coming down the Mississippi River and create the nitrate dead zone, which I'm sure everybody knows about. It's this huge body of dead Gulf of Mexico because of all the chemicals coming down. Or it could be that BP thing. Well, the crazy thing about that is that because we've depleted the coastline on the coast of Louisiana so much, we now have about 20% of the coastline that we had in place even like 50 years ago, and we're losing a football field every 30 minutes, so we're losing basically 50 football fields of wetlands every day, including in those wetlands, the Cypress Triangle. The crazy thing is that because the Cypress Triangle is empty and there's nothing to block the hurricane storm surge, That's probably why the levee went down in the lower Ninth Ward, which is why our neighborhood was under 14 feet of water after after Hurricane Katrina, and why it's so hard for people to come back, and why at this point we have about a 10% rate of return in our neighborhood. Where we used to have 18,000 people, we maybe have 3,000 or 3,500 people across the entire neighborhood. Our neighborhood, which is down here in the bottom, is one part of the neighborhood. We have like 1 in 10 folks back. So there's a couple questions. You can read this or ignore it if you want. Is there a relationship between what we do to the environment and the future of our neighborhoods and our communities? Yes. So when people say you're a tree-hugging environmentalist and you're trying to save the spotted owls, yes, you can do that too, but you can also say that this neighborhood of 18,000 people got knocked out because we didn't take care of the environment. It's pretty clear. And then going back to the allegorical thing, when we look at how to fix the wetlands and how to save the wetlands, we realize there are all these different complicated things that all have to be buffered up for the thing to actually come back. And the same thing goes with dealing with kids in our communities, right? One thing isn't going to do it. I encourage people to go and do tutoring and after-school programs, and it's not a bad thing. The reality of it is that's not going to get it, right? We need to think of new, different ways of doing stuff. We need to think of things that are more comprehensive. We need to accept the reality that we're all very, very fortunate to be here today. And figured out how to move people through the maze, probably with money, to some place where they can live and build wealth, is what I've been thinking about even more. Part of the historical legacy of institutionalized racism in New Orleans is just straight up racism, like, oh, the New Orleans Police Department, or racial profiling, or bad schools. Part of it is actually just wealth and money. Like, people just don't have money. Tim Wise, a very, very smart white intellectual anti-racist guy, said he was very, very fortunate that he was able to go to Tulane University because he was white, because his grandfather could put up their house as collateral so that his mom could get a loan for him to go to college. That same situation wasn't true for the black kids back then because they weren't allowed to own property, right? And the property that they did have, or in the cases where they did have property, the value of the property was such that it wasn't enough to leverage for a good college education. So building wealth. I could spend my time boycotting Walmart and doing other things like Occupy. I thought it was really strange that less than 1% of 1% of the 99% came out in support of the 99%. In America, right? In other places, it worked out a lot differently. But the American political situation is, it's like I said, we know Walmart's a problem. Walmart's not going to go anywhere. What I've been trying to figure out recently is how to build up the infrastructure so that we could actually stock all of the fresh vegetables at Walmart. And they would buy them from us so that the money stays in our neighborhood, is what I started to think about when I had my little teeny garden, like the teeny garden that's outside. To work with the kids that we want to work with, which reminds me of your talk about democracy building and the challenge of it, is stop blaming it on the kids. And it's not individual stress. It's not in cities across America that there are kids who just don't get it or they just don't want to. It's that the thing isn't working for them. That's what Anthony Walls calls a period of cultural distortion. It's where you realize it's not just me. It's like this whole neighborhood. It's all these kids who go to this school who are never going to get into Emory. It's just not going to happen. Who are never going to get into Tulane. We have kids in our neighborhood who don't even know what Tulane is. And then you got to figure out a way to reformulate mazeways in a way that works for the kids and works for the community and works for restaurants and grocery stores and farmers markets and things like that. What we have to do is actually formulate a different way of a new mazeway, and maybe a different way to plug into the superstructures that are out there. It should be dynamic. A lot of our kids can't do things every day. They're going to be late. And you have to accept the fact that in poor people's lives, people struggle and things don't work immediately and it doesn't work every day. And they're trying to get their crap together, but you can't harsh on kids because they're late, or something like that. Or if there's an emergency in the family that you don't particularly think is important, you need to realize that to them in their world where they're at in their lifetime and in their experience as a 19-year-old with the emotional literacy of a 13-year-old, that it is really, really important to them. And just accept that. It needs to be intuitive and primarily hands-on and experiential in our case. And sometimes it's going to be just knowledge-based stuff, like, like around growing food. In other cases, you can use growing food as an opportunity to do reflective, inquiry-based work. That's higher level thinking and much more sophisticated stuff in the work context. It should be local. You should serve the people in your community. It also means that your funding should be local. One of the things that we struggled through with our organization was trying to find good funding. And we were writing grant after grant after grant after grant after grant after grant. And then we figured out that we'd have to write a full-time grant writer so that we could just have somebody who sits around and write grants. And what we realized is if we figured out how to grow enough food, like I said, to kind of like stock the shelves of Walmart, then we could actually fund the project by doing the thing itself. And so what we did, and my partner Rob is the main one on this, is started figuring out how to grow arugula, because the French Quarter does billions of dollars a year in tourist dollars, and everybody wants salad. And we used to, I think last year we did 200 pounds or 300 pounds of arugula over the course of the entire winter. Last week we harvested 266 pounds of arugula at $7 a pound to sell to restaurants in the French Quarter, and if we had 500 pounds, we could have sold that. They want to buy local. It's like if I was in Atlanta, I'd be trying to figure out how to sell to Tulane, because Tulane kids want fresh, better food in their cafeteria, right? Yes, no, maybe? Yeah. How is the food in the cafeteria? Okay. Is it really good? Yeah. It's okay? Yeah. Is it local? Good, yeah. So Tulane is eons behind, so much so that we can't even get in the door at Tulane. And so we created a product that people want, and then we brought in folks. This is the funny thing, is these are Tulane kids who came to work with us, who now want to do a community-supported agriculture program with Tulane because they're tired of Tulane food service. And then this is our neighbor, Stanley, who's a chef, who came home from work one day, and he was like, we need to plant some okra. And so he came out and was planting okra with the kids. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I look at these kids who I've worked with. It's so funny. We have like our little hard stance on. We're all like, yeah. That's funny. Sorry. And Sam, the kid in the purple in the middle right there, actually goes to Tulane now, and he's the one who's actually been able to help us get into Tulane and make the whole thing happen. And I guess, besides talking about my project, I guess what I'm really interested in is if there's anybody here who wants advice or wants to partner up to figure out how you could do a project like this in Atlanta, or expand the vision of local sustainability from a little tiny garden to like a big, huge, monstrous garden that serves, Emory and the surrounding campus, and I'd be really interested in seeing somebody under 25 figure out how to do that with some kids from the other end of town who we know are never going to get into Emory, because we can wait till there's the other America book. We can wait until Barbara Ehrenreich's Nickel and Dime comes out again. We can wait till 2060, and there's still that other end of town. Somebody who's visionary, maybe like Ruben, should figure out how to do it. Thank you.